Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the conference titled Realizing the Vision of IMEC, Building Bridges of Connectivity, hosted by the Danube Institute and the Signap Group. I'm Christoph Veres, I'm the International Director of the Danube Institute, and I will be the Master of Ceremonies today. So without further ado, we would like to begin our program, and I would like to introduce John O'Sullivan, President of the Danube Institute, to deliver his opening remarks.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I welcome you to Budapest, to the Danube Institute, and to this significant gathering, the first of its kind, dedicated to turning the IMEC concept into concrete policy, tangible infrastructure, and, one hopes, real cooperation. Let me begin with a simple observation. The global economy is not a fixed machine, it is a network. And like any network, its strength lies in its connections. When those connections are weak, trade falters, opportunities vanish, and entire regions are left behind. When connections are strong, nations grow, relations stabilize, and peace, though never guaranteed, becomes far more likely. This, in essence, is what the IMEC project proposes, to build new strength into the global economy by creating better, faster, and more secure corridors of connectivity. This is an idea whose time has come. I think we all sense that. The world has changed. Supply chains are fragile. Energy routes are exposed. The assumption that globalization would forever float on calm seas and prosperous voyages has been proven false. IMEC begins as a response to that, not just a vision, but you might say a necessity. And yet, as history often shows, necessity alone does not ensure action or success. Grand ideas can falter when not followed by discipline. So if this conference is to matter, and I believe it can and will, we must speak not in abstractions but in specifics. Let me make a few simple observations, pragmatic ones, to help frame our day. First, infrastructure without reliability is decoration. We do not need corridors that are impressive on PowerPoints and impassable in practice. Trade routes must be dependable. That means secure. That means maintained. That means respected by the governments that host them. Second, prosperity must be mutual. No region, no country should be expected to act merely as a bridge for others. The economic benefits must flow both ways and be visible as such to the public. Otherwise, we risk building resentment, disappointment, instead of partnerships. Third, private capital will be indispensable. Governments can launch initiatives, but they cannot finance them alone, particularly today. That requires trust, and that trust depends not on slogans, but on serious governance, the rule of law, transparency, stable regulation, and also, maybe above all, predictability. Fourth, energy matters. Connectivity without energy security is like a ship without fuel. IMEC must support, not undermine, access to affordable, reliable power, whether that be oil, gas, renewables, or nuclear. The corridor must enable energy, not be sabotaged by ideology. Fifth, real inclusion requires more than a press release. Bringing in the Global South and the Indo-Pacific is not about checking boxes. It's about listening to their interests, respecting their sovereignty, and understanding that development is, well, I won't say a right, because a right requires no effort from the recipient, but an opportunity whose benefits spread widely from the recipient to those around him or her, including back to the donor. And finally, ideas only move as fast as the people who carry them. That is why gatherings like today matter, because while treaties may be signed in capital cities, trust is built in rooms like this. It will not be built overnight. I trust in rooms like this among people who speak honestly, who understand complexity, and who believe that cooperation is possible even in a fracturing world. Let me close with a note of realism and of guarded optimism too. IMEC will not solve every problem. It will not be built overnight, but it offers something rare, a plan that links not only countries, but interests. It connects the Gulf to Europe, India through the Middle East, east to west, and at its best, it could reconnect infrastructure with strategy, commerce with sovereignty, and development with dignity. We're very proud that the Danube Institute is one of the two partners that are helping to host this conversation. But we are more hopeful still that what begins here today will not end in discussion, but in action, and not be confined to this room. Let us proceed, and thank you very much on behalf of my colleagues and partners. Thank you very much for being part of this.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker is Kerry Switte, founder and executive director of the Signap Group from Israel, who is going to set the scene for us with a presentation titled A Pathway to Global Prosperity. Thank you.
Hi. So a few people asked me, are you that signal? We're not that signal. It's an acronym. And we actually are a China organization that, due to China's more aggressive and assertive behavior globally, of course, but for our case, towards Israel, which actually began, you may be surprised, in May 2021, when we had a Gaza war, we have expanded our strategy to focus on the Indo-Pacific and cultivating deeper and stronger ties there in order to send a message to China. IMEC fits into this strategy beautifully, and we are the organization in Israel that looks at IMEC on a global level. There are many organizations and government offices working on IMEC domestically, and they're doing a fantastic job, and we are really excited to be with our partners here today. And on behalf of the Danube Institute and Signap Group, I do want to welcome you to this first inaugural conference on, international conference on IMEC. Disruption appears to be the new normal, and I don't have a presentation. The slides won't appear. It's one of the glitches, the small glitches that we may face when we are actually doing IMEC. But we have to be versatile, right? So I'm going to improvise. And disruption is the new normal in this world of fractured supply chains, growing geopolitical tensions, and regional conflicts. This is exactly the time when we need a creative initiative like the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. IMEC is about connecting regions in order to increase and secure the movement of goods. But it's also about fostering greater cooperation and ties between commerce and trade between countries that don't always cooperate, if you think about the lines on the map. The vision of IMEC is to go beyond connecting goods from point A to point B, or providing more secure lines of transport. IMEC is a vision that will create an open, diverse ecosystem linking countries that have differing strategic perspectives. And despite those differences, all share a common interest in having reliable lines of transport and promoting economic security. With its innovative mix of land and sea routes, energy pipelines, and IT cables, IMEC represents a new kind of international cooperation, one that can increase trade and commerce, and over time can serve as a platform for greater people-to-people connections, cultural interchange, and deeper diplomatic ties. And with it, this new network of railways, highways, pipelines, and cables, countries that are otherwise disconnected can find new markets. And the time for IMEC is now. In fact, the India-Middle East Economic Corridor is time critical. In the face of rapid regional developments, Europe's growing political and economic headwinds, and the increasing importance of the Indo-Pacific and Global South regions, IMEC offers a unifying response to these shifting dynamics. Indeed, IMEC is a joint venture of middle powers. Countries with global reach like UAE, Israel, Saudi Arabia, countries of the European Union, working with India, a growing global powerhouse, to create a vibrant new marketplace that also benefits countries adjacent to the corridor. At the heart of IMEC is resilience, and that resilience can be found in part in the decentralized approach to cross-regional interchange. By building strong connections, what some call good plumbing, IMEC's trade routes will bypass the maritime choke points and provide reliable transport for goods, services, and people across regions. But we have to remain clear-eyed. As we heard from John, there will be many, many challenges. Taking on a project of this scale will be daunting, to say the least. We will need to work together to align very different national priorities, harmonize regulatory frameworks, and it will be necessary for us to jointly develop customs and digital protocols, because the cyber and digital connections of IMEC will be significant. Success will require good communication, cooperation, discipline, and diplomacy. Without a clear set of organizing principles to guide the governance and leadership of IMEC, we stand to face disarray, and we really cannot afford that. Managed well, IMEC will increase economic growth across a multi-regional marketplace, bringing tangible benefits to the core stakeholders, but also to their neighbors, Egypt and other countries of the global south in Asia and Africa that are currently underserved by existing supply chains. A cornerstone of IMEC's success will be its ability to forge strong public-private partnerships. And there will be a few things that we need from the public part of the partnerships. Governments will be absolutely necessary in creating the regulatory frameworks. We'll need government also to secure private sector investment and to do the same thing, secure the infrastructure. But it will be the private sector, the investors, innovators, and entrepreneurs, from individuals to multinational corporations, and I'm happy that some of you are here today, because it is you who are going to transform IMEC from a vision into a reality. It's that good mix of governmental leadership and private sector ingenuity that spur growth. And effective public-private partnerships will expedite the transformation of IMEC from a vision into a force of positive economic change across the regions. But of course, public-private partnerships come with their own challenges. It will not be easy to carry out joint procurement or establish integrated standards or manage risk. And yes, it would be a lot easier to have a top-down, centrally controlled system, which I think maybe resonates with other connectivity projects out there. But that would bring far fewer benefits to us, the stakeholders. And that is why we're here today, to explore how we can make IMEC a success. And some of the questions we're going to be asking are, how can we ensure that the governance of IMEC is efficient and inclusive? How should we navigate the geopolitical complexities that might challenge cooperation among countries with very diverse interests. How do we build partnerships across IMEC's route while at the same time creating opportunities for collaboration beyond the route? And very critically, how will we ensure that our communication, coordination, and collaboration are sustained over the long haul? Do we need a dedicated secretariat, or should we keep institutionalization to a minimum? These discussions today will tackle the challenges and lay the foundations for IMEC's long-term success. Middle powers make up the majority of the stakeholders of IMEC, and it is incumbent upon us, the middle powers, to work with India, a growing great power, to strengthen our economic security, because, as we all know, economic security is national security. IMEC represents a joint line of defense, an economic line of defense, that can strengthen the partners and offers a new way for nations to pursue their own paths. This is a critical moment. We are at a crossroads, pun intended, because it's not just geography, it's history. And in these uncertain times, IMEC can be a stabilizing force where, through collaboration, the stakeholders and their partners can become stronger, more resilient, and more secure. Thank you.
Thank you. Before our first plenary session, our last speaker is the Honourable Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia, who is going to deliver the first keynote address of our conference today.
Well, thank you, Christoph. Lovely to be here. Budapest is one of the world's most interesting capitals, and the Danube Institute is one of the world's best intellectual forums. The world, as we know, improves person by person, and given that so much personal contact has its origins in commerce, greater commercial connectivity obviously makes a lot of sense. What I want to do to help kick off these days' discussions is to talk about the overall context in which this connectivity is or is not taking place. There's no doubt that the world in early 2020, pre-pandemic, pre-Ukraine, pre-October 7, pre the intensifying contest with China, and pre-Trump 2.0, was more free, more fair, more rich, and more safe for more people than ever before in history. It was the product of modernisation, of globalisation, and of the comparative absence of major war under the long Pax Americana. But globalisation has also meant equalisation. Rich countries have become somewhat richer, while poor countries, most of them at least, have become much less poor as people, goods, technology and ideas have moved freely around the globe. In China, for instance, 500 million people have moved from the third world to the middle class in scarcely a generation. India, Indonesia and Vietnam are not far behind in their economic takeoff. South Korea and Taiwan, at least in GDP per capita terms, are on a par with the countries of Western Europe, while Singapore and the Gulf states have far surpassed them. Since President Clinton agreed to it joining the WTO, China has become the factory of the world. It's now world-leading in the tallest buildings, the fastest trains, robotics and AI. And while American consumers have gained access to ever cheaper consumer goods, robot vacuum cleaners and cars networked into a control centre in Beijing, America is at risk of deindustrialising and on the verge of losing its traditional high-tech preeminence. Global capitalism has made almost every country richer, some much richer, much faster than others, and contrary to Marx, the gap between rich and poor countries has grown smaller, not wider. If you're in Bangladesh or Thailand, striving to offer more services to more of your people, that's all good. But if you're in the United States or even in Europe, navigating a rocky transition from manufacturing to services while still trying to be the world's policeman, it looks like you're paying for other people's success. America might still be the source of most of the best ideas, but more and more of them end up taking form somewhere else. The US, plus the West more generally, has not been helped by the politics of climate and identity and the long morale-sapping march of the left through the institutions. And the brutal truth is that the weaponry for America to maintain the military edge on which the Pax Americana rested often now relies on components from its chief military rival. While America is largely played by market rules, China has borrowed technology, subsidised national champions, and manipulated markets in its drive for dominance. It was no commitment to economic freedom that had China embrace markets, just ruthless pragmatism, biding and hiding its way to becoming, as its leaders have often declared, the world's #1 power within 25 years, and in the meantime to dominate the East Asia region. As the world's one-time middle kingdom, with a fifth of global population, that's not an unreasonable aim, except that a world dominated by China will more closely resemble China itself, where East and West, North and South, the party leads all, as opposed to the broad benevolence that's characterised the long Anglo-American ascendancy. On reflection, the West should never have thought that maximising wealth was the overriding policy objective. Freedom, justice, the ability to maintain independence matter too. Everything we strove for before the fall of the Berlin Wall beguiled us into thinking that Fukuyama was right and that history had ended with the permanent triumph of liberal capitalism. The notion that freer trade is always and everywhere to be sought should now substantially be revised. There are some capabilities that every country would be wise to maintain, regardless of the operation of free markets, such as the ability to repair vehicles, ships and planes and machine tools, with a sufficient industrial base to produce items it need, from munitions to medicine, plus stockpiles of essential goods for periods of global disruption. As a general rule, freer trade still makes sense between strategically like-minded countries under the rule of law with comparable standards of living, because that would increase competition between more businesses on largely level playing fields. So that's a tick for the trade deals that Australia did with Japan and South Korea while I was PM, and for the deal that Australia did with Britain while I was on the UK Board of Trade. Freer trade between like-minded countries under the rule of law, but with quite different standards of living, makes sense if there's no real issue when more labour-intensive industries migrate abroad. So that's a tick for the trade deal Australia did with India when I was Special Trade Representative. But, and it's a pretty significant but, freer trade between strategic competitors just gives an aggressor more economic leverage to achieve a political objective. In 2020, China weaponised trade against Australia, for instance, boycotting some $20 billion of our coal, barley, wine and seafood exports as a punishment for our call for an independent inquiry into the origins of the Wuhan virus, in total disregard of the trade deal done when I was PM, when it was still realistic to expect China to keep liberalising. But even so, there's no problem trading with China, provided that trade adds as much to our economic strength as to theirs. And the mistake all our businesses should avoid is having China enmeshed in critical supply chains that could be turned off like a tap if it suits the CCP to make trouble. Which brings me to the 47th President of the United States. Now, leaving aside questions of character, there's Trump domestic and there's Trump foreign. Trump domestic controls immigration, declares there's only two genders, wants to drill baby drill and make government more efficient. A big tick all round. Trump foreign is a mixed bag, a big tick for getting Europe to do more in its own defence, even if that means rudely ruffling diplomatic feathers, but not for repeatedly insulting Canada as the 51st state, demanding Greenland and hitting allies with tariffs ranging from 10 to 25%. Then there's the on again, off again, maybe, maybe not, yesterday yes, today no, tomorrow perhaps, 100% plus, not revenue raising but trade destroying tariffs on China that the President's boosters say are all a cunning plan to force free trade on the democratic world while economically isolating China and restoring America's military-industrial base. Maybe unsettling everyone is the art of the deal, but the process risks trashing America's brand. What is indeed insufficiently acknowledged is how America has made the modern world and all the blood and treasure it's expended to keep it safe. But even America's critics have usually conceded its goodwill. In the words attributed to de Tocqueville, America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. And that's what America risks forfeiting in the current tariff wars, its reputation for high-mindedness and its unique standing as the benevolent hegemon. Now, Trump's America can do great things when it chooses, like defuse, it seems, a potential nuclear confrontation on the subcontinent. But what's less clear is when and where it will intervene, or even whose side it's on. Now, I hope this less predictable America won't outlast the current presidency, because in the meantime, the world's problems are not going away, which is a challenge for the rest of us. Why shouldn't Britain and France step up to provide the security guarantee that Ukraine must have after any ceasefire? Why shouldn't Israel take its own steps to deny Iran the nuclear weapons it would almost certainly use? Why shouldn't Japan consider what's needed to secure Taiwan? Why shouldn't Australia pick up the burdens a capricious America has laid down in the Pacific? Why wouldn't India, the other democratic superpower, consider what steps it might take to buttress freedom and democracy in the wider world, given that it's been such an exemplar of both? Why wouldn't Britain, Canada, Australia and New Zealand swiftly conclude a comprehensive free trade deal, given that the CANZAC countries are already in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, plus a new security deal, given that they're all Five Eyes partners? Because we can't look to America for the leadership it's in no mood to give. And there'll be no less need for leadership should American leadership decline. That just means that other countries will have to be more adult about their global responsibilities.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much. We are going to continue with our first plenary session. Going forward, I will introduce the moderator of every session, and then the moderators will introduce the speakers themselves. I ask every moderator not to read out the bios of the speakers, because that would make the sessions very ponderous. So our first plenary session, the geopolitical imperative of connecting Europe, Middle East, and South Asia, will be moderated by Kerry Switte, founder and executive director of the Signal Group.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to invite the speakers. Tomohiko, will you please join us? And Kapil. Kapil, are you here? Kapil Sharma? Thank you. And Tanos Dokos. Oh, fantastic. Just as I read you out, please. And Peter, and I'm sorry, Peter, you know who you are. Ebtisam, please join us. I am really delighted to have all of you on this panel. I am actually very honored. Okay. So first, I want to just take 1 second. Could you go back to the other slide of the map? I know we've all been staring at it. Is there somebody here who's running the slides who can hear me? What I want you to pay, thank you. It's quite, this was a creative effort, this map. It's not just, done out of, I don't know, impressionist art goals. When we started building this program, the Danube Institute and Signal Group, the first graphic was a direct line from point A to point B, as I mentioned earlier. And we said, why? Why there? Why are those red dots there? Why are we stopping in those places? There's so many possibilities. There are so many options. And actually, and that's where this idea came from, is that we want to keep this open. We want it to be inclusive, although I really hate that word. I think it's been destroyed by the Americans. But nonetheless, we do want it in the true meaning of the word. We want everyone to have an option to join this. And I hope next year at the second annual, we'll be seeing more yellow sections of the world that will be on those under those wisps of wind. So right now, we are talking about the geopolitical imperative of connecting Europe, Middle East, and South Asia. And, on a personal level, I would say there couldn't be more of a geopolitical imperative. The world is increasingly fractured, and countries are looking for new ways to connect in very real terms. And that means railroads, highways, and sea lanes. And I want to understand from all of you how you see IMEC fitting into this trend. How do you see it as a force of stabilizing the regions and integration for economic development and therefore economic security? And I would like to put out, an initial question, and you can take it in any direction you want for 5 minutes. And so the question is, what are the geopolitical drivers, in your view, from your perspective, all from different countries? Oh, and I'm supposed to introduce them. Apologies. So Tomohiko Taniguchi is an old friend and really incredible resource on the inner workings of Japan. He is the specially appointed professor, University of Tsukaba, former special advisor to the cabinet of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And as I go through each one, as I invite each of you to speak, to answer this question, I'll introduce you. So what are the geopolitical drivers making IMEC an urgent and timely initiative? Tomohiko.
The answer is obvious. There is a huge imperative. But before that, I am here partly as a member of the advisory board of Signal. And as such, I must say that Hamas should bring all the remaining hostages back to Israel. It is, I think, all about the future. Already, India has outnumbered the population of China. In 20, 25 years' time, China may or may not be celebrating the 100th anniversary, centenary, since the founding of the People's Republic of China. But until that time, lots of things may happen. What about India? I think India is going to be remaining as is. Functioning democracy. Lousy, perhaps, but functioning democracy. What about Saudi Arabia? The clock is ticking for Saudi Arabia. Fossil fuel regime is rapidly going away. Someone who is acutely aware of this change is no one but MBS of Saudi Arabia. Belt and Road Initiative is a unilateral initiative driven mostly by the self-interests of China. However, as Karis pointed out, it is a network of middle-sized companies who all wish to bring about future prosperity with rising powers in their own hands. What's missing here in this picture, I'm afraid, is Japan. I, for one, have been advocating that Japan be part of the I2U2 framework. India, Israel, USA, UAE. The agendas I2U2 are supposed to look at are all civilian in nature. Water, infrastructure, health, space, and so forth. There must be ample room for Japan to play in those areas. So essentially what I'm saying is that the IMEC is all about future, and the IMEC is all about future promises. And I would like Japan to be very much an integral part of this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello. Okay, thank you. I'm very excited to hear you say that. I couldn't agree more. Actually, when we were traveling around India, I was traveling with a brigadier general from the recently retired head of the Air Force, and he started to call it JIMEC. But we have to be careful with that. Let's get it off the ground first, and then we can bring in Japan. Now, I would like to turn to Kapil Sharma, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. What is your view on this core issue?
Thank you, and good morning, and I want to thank you for inviting me to participate at this conference and discussion, and a very timely one as well. I can talk, I've been really talking about IMEC and I2U2 mainly from a U.S.-India perspective, so I'd like to continue in that, frame my remarks around that. IMEC and I2U2 came out of the Abraham Accords. And the challenge that we all have is that the Abraham Accords was led by President Trump. I2U2 and IMEC was led by President Biden. And now we're back to President Trump. And so the United States was a huge driver of convening these countries to get these two agreements together. And the U.S. was facilitating a lot of the discussions. Unfortunately, what has happened post-October 7th is that we haven't been able to get a convener for either initiative, and so it is now stalled. A lot of it is IMEC and I2U2 conversations are really more like bilateral conversations. Prime Minister Modi was just in Saudi Arabia, and they issue a press release talking about IMEC, but there's nothing that moves IMEC forward. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges, and hopefully we can discuss more of that today. I think that one of the challenges that we will see, and I posed this question in India 2 weeks ago, is who's going to drive either initiative. The Trump administration has made it clear that it's America first. The problem with IMEC is that it is still unclear to this administration what is the benefit to the United States, economic benefit. And they tend to be leaning more towards I2U2 because, as the professor rightly said, it directly includes the United States. So if you look at some of the recent conversations, and when Prime Minister Modi had visited the U.S. Right after President Trump was inaugurated, they discussed IMEC, but I don't think members of the Trump administration knew what IMEC really meant. But they do know I2U2. So I think the biggest challenge and what we need to accelerate right now is who is going to convene, who is going to lead. I'm not sure whether the Indians can. So what other country will step up to motivate the other countries to participate? Because there's a lot of challenges to IMEC, and there needs to be some real leadership on this.
Thank you. I do think you have hit the nail on the head as a very, everyone expects the U.S. to be the leader. I think we all suffer from conventional wisdom. And what we need to do is, and I, if I may say, Israelis are very good at stepping outside conventional wisdom. And that's how it's such an innovation-oriented country, but it's more, as you know, in the area of technology. We need to be innovative in geopolitics, geostrategy, geoeconomics. And so I want to pose the question, which we can talk about later, and we'll move on to the next speaker, but just food for thought. What if it's not a country? What if it's not a government? So, you know, there are other players that have a lot of power. As I mentioned, multinational corporations is one of them. Okay, our next speaker, Tanos Dokos, is the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, from a security practitioner's perspective, conferences with a strong practical dimension are like oxygen, so thank you for the invitation. You ask about the geopolitical imperative. So we live in an era of considerable uncertainties about the shape, the structure of the international system, which is obviously in a state of transition, which needs to be managed. But personally, I prefer big win-win projects rather than zero-sum competitions, which may lead to big conflicts. Second point, I usually, often tell my colleagues in the EU that we all live in a big Brussels bubble, thinking that this is the whole world. This is all that matters, and we tend to ignore what has been called the global south. So we need to connect. Also, from a European perspective, the EU needs to make some fast decisions and then follow up with actions about its own regional and global role. And we also need to decide whether a new Cold War in Europe can be avoided. But that's a family decision or discussion we need to have. Now, we can talk all day about globalization, whether that was a good or a bad thing, and whether it's dead or still alive, and we can talk about globalization and supply chains and friendshoring and inshoring and all that. But I think it's obvious that the global economy keeps growing. Most of that growth is taking place in Asia and eventually in Africa. So it's important to connect with those regions. And since the I2U2 was mentioned, I think that it can be expanded in both directions, towards Asia but also towards Europe. And we could perhaps discuss the idea of linking those economic corridors like IMEC with informal security corridors.
Fascinating. I think that the bubble aspect is something we all suffer from. We in Israel have it in our regional bubble. Europe rethinking its role. You said make fast decisions. It's a contradiction in terms, I think, when you talk about Europe and fast decisions. But you are right, and that's what definitely is needed, and input on Europe seeing itself as a positive influence in some of the regions that you mentioned through action would be very welcome. So we'll maybe dive more into that in a bit. For now, I would like to invite Peter Andras Starai, State Secretary for Security Policy and Energy Security, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. So happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for this great opportunity to discuss geopolitics. I would start with saying that Hungary stepped out from the bubble a little bit, and we tried to think out of the box, and we tried to act according to that. And I think this is a successful foreign policy. But one of the key words of this foreign policy, or maybe the key word, is connectivity. We have been a member of NATO and the European Union for 20 years, 25 years. We are a member of the European Conference, OSCE, and the Council of Europe. But about 15 years ago, we realized that this is not enough. We are a landlocked country, and our economy is very much export-oriented. So we realized that we have to reach out to the rest of the world while not giving up on our allegiances with NATO and the EU. And we did that. We declared two basic new strategic policies. One was the Eastern Opening. This covers countries from India to China to Japan, Australia, Vietnam, and others. And we also declared a policy of Southern Opening, which is mainly directed towards Africa, but also it covers Latin America. And it's unbelievable, the success of this policy, that in 15 years, our trade volumes have skyrocketed. And really, on the basis of mutual respect, we approached a lot of countries which we did not before. We extended the network of our embassies. And in that respect, I think Hungary has become a kind of global player, although it's a landlocked country, as I said, and it's not very big. But still, in Central Asia, in Asia, we have built lots of very good relations. We have a strategic alliance with Israel, but at the same time, we could also build very strong relations with the Arab world, or the Muslim world, I would say. And that is something which is a kind of art of foreign policy. Now, if I look at the map that you spoke about, it's interesting that it doesn't cover the whole of Europe, I mean, the whole of the European Union. And I think we have to work further on that. Hungary is really very much committed to these types of regional and intra-regional cooperations. We think India is really the rising giant, and we have to work with them very closely. And it's also very good to have Prime Minister Abbott here, because that also symbolically connects the big round or the big circle around the world. One thing to add is that whatever regional cooperation we sympathize with and we cooperate with or participate in, that should not mean that these regional cooperations go against each other. So we need to keep open the channels to everybody, because even in terms of lasting peace and global peace, I think it's very important that we don't close the channels. We stick to diplomacy, we stick to an equal footing when we approach each other, and then we have a better chance to maintain stability and peace in the world.
An outstanding set of principles and approach, which, not having a background in Hungary, I'm very interested to learn about, and to see how Hungary's successful roadmap maybe has some advice for the roadmap that we're hoping to put together for IMEC. And last but absolutely not least, my sister in arms, Ebtisam Alktebi, is the president and founder of the Emiratis Policy Center. And I just want to say that at dinner last night, we learned that Ebtisam is running the only institute, geopolitical institute in the Emirates as a woman. And I'm the only woman running an institute dealing with international geopolitics in Israel. So we're framing this, and it's appropriate. floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I am also the only Arab woman in the Arab world running the think tank. You know what's good about this panel? That's starting with women and ending by women. I just put 5 bullets about the importance of IMEC, which stem from multiple converging economic and geopolitical factors. First is the strategic rivalries and multipolarity. IMEC provides a non-Chinese alternative to Belt and Road Initiative and empowers middle powers like UAE, Saudi Arabia, India, to shape global connectivity. The second factor is that supply chain resilience. COVID-19 and Red Sea disruption by Houthi have highlighted the need for diversified, secure trade corridors that bypass vulnerable maritime checkpoints. The third, the Gulf economic diversification. Gulf states are leveraging IMEC to shift from oil dependence to become key logistic and trade nodes aligned with Vision 2071 for UAE or 2030 for Saudi Arabia. The other aspect also, the green trade, the green energy transition. IMEC supports regional energy integration through hydrogen and renewable, advancing global climate and COP28, the UAE hosted goals. Fifth, the regional normalization. By building on the Abrahamic Accords, IMEC foster economic interdependence and cooperation across previously tense regional lines. I would believe, yes, IMEC stopped now, but Abrahamic Accord did not stop. The idea is still there. And you can find alternatives for the connectivity. Just you need to think out of the box now. I think India now thinking about also moving to Suez Canal or Alexandria. UAE found another alternative that going through Iraq to Turkey. This is connectivity. You always thinking about corridors that facilitate. It's not about only moving the goods. It's moving of the people also. Connectivity means creating bridges, not walls. The last, not least, is the Euro-Asian connectivity realigns, which His Excellency mentioned now. As Europe seeks alternative to Russian energy, IMEC serves as strategic corridor linking India to Europe via the Middle East, which they are the oil-producing countries. There are many advantages of this. It depends where you are in this corridor stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We could discuss each of your points for an hour, but I want to just touch on, you mentioned China. Thank you for that. I think it's very important for us to realize that in the minds of anyone who's thinking about IMEC, IMEC was stopped, dead, whatever. When I was in China, they said to me, oh, it's so great that IMEC is dead. We're really happy about that. And we're also really happy that the war in the Middle East, aka Israel, Hamas, is distracting the US. It's very good for China. So I want us all to realize that once IMEC is perceived as being off the ground, we can expect China to be out there bad-mouthing it, for lack of a more impressive word. And I think we need to be prepared by explaining and conveying to the Global South and the Indo-Pacific why IMEC is going to benefit so many before that takes place. And the other quick point I want to make is you said, Peter, which took me aback a bit, we're partners working with Israel, but also the Arabs. Why but also? We work together. We've been working together forever under the table, and just thanks to the Abraham Accords, a good amount of it has moved over the table. And what you hear in the news is not the reality. The street and the leaders and the business people are different. And we've been working together and continue to work together, and the spirit of Abraham Accords permeates across the region, and it's why Saudi Arabia said at the G20 when IMEC was announced that they would put $20 billion down on this corridor before normalization with Israel. And by the way, I want to remind everyone, 3 weeks later, October 7th. The timing is not a coincidence. So I would like to know, Tomohiko, how do you see IMEC connectivity across these regions contributing to stability? How is this economic line supposed to make us more stable?
The answer, once again, is obvious. India is going to be the 21st century superpower, for sure. And Saudi Arabia, the single most important nation in the Middle East, is rapidly changing. And they are seeking other opportunities to seek their prosperity. And for Japan, Korea, Australia, the connectivity that binds the Asian parts, Korea, Japan, Australia, with the Middle East via the Indian Ocean will still be very much important. If you see cohesive entities, India, Saudi Arabia, and Europe connecting with each other, that would certainly benefit economically and geostrategically as well, the countries like Japan, Korea, Australia. With that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, actually, my former boss, Shinzo Abe, coined the word Indo-Pacific, when previously everyone talked about Asia-Pacific. He was the one who came to understand that the framework of Asia-Pacific would not include the 21st century superpower of India. So he changed the frame to Indo-Pacific. All others followed suit. In Hawaii, you've got Indo-Pacific Command Center. And India has got a special sense of ownership when it comes to the Indian Ocean. So we must harness that sense of ownership of India to make the IMEC more prosperous. That would be it. But let me just remind you, India is a special country that has only 2 Confucius schools in that vast country. Only 2. Japan has 13. The United States had thousands. The UK has had hundreds. But India has had only 2. If there is one country in the world that has got no gated Chinatown, that's India, which makes it imperative for Japan to invest more into India.
Okay, so this is the second time you brought up India. I'm going to have to ask you, Kapil, how do you see India's role in this? And also, please pick up on the stability factor, how this connectivity is going to create stability.
One, I wanted to respond to your one point about China thinking that IMEC is dead. It's good that they think it's dead, mainly because I've seen actually great facilitating conversation. The one thing that I want everybody to remember, when IMEC was conceived, I don't think India, the Saudis, or the Americans thought of it going beyond the original participants. But what it did spur was Iraq and Turkey talking about doing a competitive trade route. It forced other countries to start talking about how do they now compete with BRI and IMEC. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with other countries waking up and saying, you know what, we need to think of competitive routes, because competitive routes think of innovation, skills development, job creation. And I think that's a good thing. So if the Chinese want to think that it's dead, that's good. I like seeing these other countries get involved. From an India perspective, they're in a tough spot. I think they're in a tough spot because they see the world as a multipolar world. The United States sees it as a unipolar world. China sees it as a bipolar world. And so when you have three different views of how the world should operate, especially around trade, you're going to have different philosophical approaches. For the Indians, they like IMEC. It keeps them in the center of a lot of conversations and discussions, but they have some real, and also IMEC should be seen in three phases. I should step back. Phase one is India to UAE, which is more or less done. Phase two is the connectivity within the Gulf, and then phase three will be from EU to the Gulf. India already is in a good position because IMEC starts technically from Mundra Port, which is an Adani port, and it ends in Haifa Port, which is an Adani port, with a little bit of sprinkling of Chinese interests, in my understanding. And so the Indians are poised to play a very important role. The relationship with the Emirates is a good one. I think the Indians feel like they can grow from that to grow IMEC. One of the key things which nobody talks about, and I would say that we should all look at, is that the key to IMEC is transshipment. It's the ability to move products across. The Europeans, the Americans understand that. I'm not sure whether the Gulf understands transshipment because they just don't do it to the level that the Europeans and the Americans do it. The Emirates and the Indians signed an agreement in September of 2024 called Maitri. Now, Maitri is a very fascinating thing because what it does is it created a portal on the movement of goods between India and the UAE. And it is a public-private partnership. So everything that you discussed before, the Prime Minister Abbott spoke before, Mr. Sullivan spoke before about public-private partnerships, the Emiratis and the Indians are already doing it. So I think what we should do is we should pick up on that and say, how do we expand something like a Maitri? The Indians also see IMEC facilitating capital investment. 2024 was the year of elections, Super Bowl of elections, and the thing that we saw at the Atlantic Council that struck us the most was the number one issue around the world was jobs. And there's no bigger issue in the world today than in India and jobs. Actually, Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. So for the Indian government, IMEC could hopefully spur capital investment, which will create jobs and skilling. And while the professor feels that India will be a great superpower, it'll be the second largest economy within the next 50 years. The only way that they can achieve that is if they have the skilled workforce to be able to do it. And IMEC and I2U2 will help facilitate that. Without successful implementation of I2U2 and IMEC, I'm not sure India can meet its full ability.
Well, that will confront us with many, many challenges. But interesting about Maitri, I did not know about that. There's TruckNet, that is the app that is managing the trucks from Jordan to Haifa port. And I thought it was interesting that you kept mentioning the Gulf as everything from the UAE up to Haifa. So I guess now we're part of the Gulf. So that's actually a very welcoming concept. Tanos, what do you think of the India factor, please, and also how IMEC brings stability or can bring stability?
Well, let me start with the second question. I think but three ways to see that. First of all, to echo a former US president, it's the economy, stupid. So we need to make sure that as many people and countries as possible benefit from trade and investment. Secondly, if a number of countries decide to work together to make sure that the corridor is secure and the region is stable, then we'll almost automatically work more broadly together to stabilize our regions. And the third point, resilience is important. We need as many options as possible to avoid in the future situations like the Red Sea and the Houthis. But then a fourth point, in your introductory comments, you used the work network. And I think the international economy needs a network of veins and arteries, as many as possible. Of course, they have to be functional and economically viable, but I think none of us likes oligopolies or even monopolies. Now, to move to India, and for Greece, it's a country of increasing importance. We are working together closely in the last couple of years for a number of reasons, but I think India is a pivotal country for stability in both the Gulf region and all the way to Europe, and then for Asia as well. It's linking the Middle East with the Asia-Pacific, and the fact that they are participating in a number of initiatives, informal initiatives, some were mentioned. It makes them a key country. Of course, they have significant challenges to overcome. They're not in the easiest spot in the world, but I guess many of us are not in ideal neighborhoods. But I think India will be one of the defining countries of the 21st century.
So stability through investment and trade, I don't think anyone would argue with you on that. Although it does conjure kind of a mixed metaphor, I love the veins and arteries. I think you're absolutely right. And when talking about IMEC versus, for example, the BRI, I tried to use the metaphor of blockchain, which I was told I shouldn't. I'm not really sure why, but the idea that each node is an independent, autonomous factor that has its own agency and inputs into the security of the full network. I think that it actually is very applicable, and the concept of network. And I just want to add one point to your comments on India and also Tomohiko. I think everybody so far. Certainly in Israel, and I think the U.S. has made it pretty clear that we see India as a counterweight to China in two ways. One, size. It does have the size going for it, because size matters. And another is cultural. And one of the challenges that we're all facing, which I'm not sure we're all aware of, is the Global Civilization Initiative. One of Xi Jinping's 3 initiatives that he said are designed to reshape global governance to better suit China. And we, countries of the West, including the Eastern countries that have a Western approach towards democracy and human rights, et cetera, I don't think necessarily grasp the civilization issue and how insidious or how China is insidiously using that. But India does. And for example, India has done many things about reclaiming its ancient historic origins, Bharat, if I pronounce that right, and Sanskrit, and many things that came out in the G20. I was just thrilled to see how India was using its civilization. Maybe it wasn't using it, but I saw it as using its civilizational power as a counterweight to China. So I think there are many, many things, many layers to what IMEC is and can be. Peter, do you have thoughts on India and the stability that can come from IMEC?
Well, I hinted at India. I said it's a rising giant, and sometimes you have the impression that even the leaders of India have not yet realized their huge hand, and they are looking at it. But their influence is growing very quickly, and it can be a very important regional balance power. India is also one of the biggest investors in Hungary, so we really look at them, and our trade volume has increased very steadily in the past years. Now, our concern is basically that Europe as such has not really realized how important this type of high-level connectivity would be. And because of that, the competitiveness of Europe is worsening. We are getting weaker globally. And Hungary tried to wake up the European leaders last year during our presidency of the Council of the European Union. And we put competitiveness into the center of our presidency, actually. And we were able to reach consensus on a document on this. But it doesn't mean that things will change and the philosophy will change, because many European leaders are not open enough to build those bridges that you and others spoke about, and to take really seriously enough the role of countries like Australia or India. And Hungary is stuck in between, you know, because we have a we have a very open mind for free trade, for example. But if you look at the institutional arrangements of the European Union on free trade, that's really very, very disappointing. To conclude a free trade agreement with a third party takes sometimes 20 years. You know, it's ridiculous. They always want to put ideological, political things into these papers, which are not acceptable to some of our partners, and it would be much more important to concentrate on the free trade aspect. But not, they are not. And because of that, Europe is losing its weight. And so that's why we really try to build separately from all this our bilateral relations with all these countries, because we see the benefits of that, and we see that it's a stabilizing factor, it's good for energy security, for connectivity.
Wow. It's every time you talk about Europe, it just brings me back down. It's a heavy load that you are carrying. It sounds like Hungary is an outsider, you know, sort of a bit on the outside edge in its way of thinking regarding, or in contrast to the European Union. And you know, I'm happy that you're there putting in the good effort, but maybe success, you know, the success of IMEC can open some minds. Ebtisam, India and stability.
I agree with Peter. I mean, the free trade agreement with GCC took 30 years and did not yet sign. So UAE took a bilateral, and we are in the process of signing between EU and UAE. So bureaucracy in the EU, I mean, it's easily between European country and any others, but EU is really need to be reformed from bureaucracy and hundreds of documents. And you cannot ask others to be like you. You have to accept that we are different, but we can work together. I mean, the history path is not the same. Nobody wants to be like Europe. Okay, Europe nice, good, but I have my own path. This is still needs to be also, Europe need to revisit its thinking. In terms of IMEC as driver for stability, I would say IMEC is more than a connectivity project. It's a geopolitical tool that fosters first stability through economic interdependence. So, cross-border infrastructure and job creation, reduce conflict, intensive and address fragility in key regions. So this is one of something can be in shared between those whom they are involved in IMEC. The second thing is the strategic autonomy via diversified partnership. So IMEC enables countries like India, like UAE, like Saudi, to engage with multiple global powers without over-dependence. And the third one is institutional integration. I mean that customs harmonized and shared infrastructure build habit of cooperation and strengthen governance. This is also something through trade it can be resolved many conflict and leads to stability. Soft power projection. I mean that Gulf state and India can leverage IMEC to lead as a development-focused peace promoting regional powers. The fifth, the resilience, which Thanos mentioned, resilience to external shocks. I mean that by avoiding checkpoints and enabling multimodal transports, IMEC safeguards against geopolitical disruptions. So this is what I mean that if Gaza now in war, you should think out of the box, finding another way. We shouldn't stuck that until Gaza solved. And this is one thing also those signed IMEC should think about it. Six is energy and digital sovereignty, which it means the hydrogen networks and data corridors reduce reliance on foreign actors supporting long-term autonomy. You know what's the difference between IMEC and Belt and Road? Belt and Road is created for China's interest. So China is financing the whole project from A to Z. Here it's different. It is more partnership rather than involving in one project initiated by one country, which is, should be always when you market the IMEC, why it's important.
So we have this very core question about leadership. I think we found our leader.
I'm a general, they call me.
The general. Okay, well, I think a general is what would be best to handle bringing IMEC together. I want to ask you about this. We heard from Prime Minister Abbott that America is not likely to lead, that America wants to see what's in it for America with this current leadership. You know, show me the money. But the complexity of all these different areas, right? The logistics, the aligning interests, the very practical aspects of standards. I mean, we even have the question of the rail, what's it called? The size of the width of the rails that they match when they're crossing from country to country. So we need this ability to organize and convene, work in partnership, and find consensus, which is always the most difficult. And especially when we have such a diverse group from one, I could say one side, the Europeans with endless rules and regulations and standards way up here, because they never had to worry about their security, so they were able to indulge in all of that. And all the way to the other end, which is, I would say, coming through, reverse back through Israel and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and into India, where, as you progress, you have a whole different approach to those things. So where can we find, Tomohiko, where can we find leadership? Is it going to be a kind of consensus? Are we going to nominate somebody from every country? Are we going to work through NGOs? Or is it going to be, multinational corporations. What's realistic here?
IMEC. What is IMEC? Is still a question that lots of leaders in the world are asking themselves. The same goes with I2U2. It would have been easier for the British people to call IIW rather than I2U2. Branding can only be possible when leaders have chosen to address this issue all the time. So, on the sidelines of G20, any other venues, there must be a gathering among those IMEC countries. India, first and foremost, MBS perhaps, and Netanyahu and others. And always frame this issue for the young generations, because it is all about the future, as I mentioned earlier. And for the future prosperity, for the futures of the future generations, those leaders must always speak about the value to be created by IMEC. Rather than delving into details like railways, they need to speak about the regimes in which they can still gain prosperity by using not fossil fuel, but perhaps other means of energies, as you mentioned. So leadership cannot be represented by any single country. There must be a shared dream, that shared vision, always spoken by the future-oriented leaders. And I think it's going to be politically attractive for those leaders to speak about these future issues because it's going to give seeds of hope to the peoples in their own countries.
So you're saying that the leaders of the core stakeholders should ensure that they convene on the sidelines of existing gatherings?
Yes, I think it's too early for the IMEC member nations to think about establishing a permanent office or anything like that. It's still in a very much fledgling stage, whereby leaders from those nations establish a habit of speaking about IMEC all the time.
Okay. Capo, what's your view of that, and where would you take this to towards a more actionable direction?
As I mentioned before, I think the initial discussion of IMEC between the participating countries was a three-phased approach. Phase one, U.S., Emirates, then the Gulf, and then to Europe. Phase one is done. Phase two is a difficult one. I met with the French delegation, and they said for IMEC to really work, it has to be faster and more economic than the current route going through the Suez. So if it's costly and it's more expensive, then why would private business use it? And so I think that it has to be a public-private partnership. It probably has to be privately led, like a 1.50 dialogue type of organization. Maybe this organization or your organization can facilitate that. You know, I've heard business groups say that it needs to be 5 days. It's got to move 5 days from the Emirates to Israel. 1 day of docking
From the Emirates, not 5 days from India.
No.
Okay.
It's got to, because it'll take 1 day to offload, 3 days across, go through security issues. Some countries are going to look at where they can add value, then Haifa to Europe. But the 5 days in the Gulf is the key. And that's going to need private sector involvement and technology and innovation and capital to make that happen. And I think the other thing that is going to be important is you have to include Egypt in some capacity. Because Egypt stands to lose a lot of money, and you notice private sector money. So if one country is going to lose money, that will derail IMEC as well. So we have to find ways. Maybe the governments can figure out how to keep Egypt happy, but let the private sector figure out how to make this work in 5 days or less than current trade rates.
I'm really grateful for that. I think knowing the 5-day target is a way to reach the 5-day target. And I think that I would imagine if enough good minds are put together, that can happen. And I'm so glad you brought up Egypt, because I mentioned it in my opening remarks. It is critical that Egypt benefit or be part. And I think we need to remember that IMEC doesn't have to be only one route. It can branch off. And those 5 days can be worked out in multiple fashions. So, yeah, I think that you've given us some
I just want to add one more point.
Please.
Jordan is also the wild card. Jordan doesn't have infrastructure. Somebody has to invest in Jordan, whether that's IMF, World Bank, or it's the Saudis and the Emiratis. Somebody has, because Jordan, it just has a route, but we're a road route, but we need rails.
Yeah, Jordan is a challenge. I'm sorry to say it's the only country we couldn't get here today because the speakers who we spoke to who wanted to come could only do it in a closed-door fashion, and this is an open and public conference. So we need to think about why, and this is all a big challenge in its own right. Tanos, what's your view on the practical aspect of this geopolitical issue?
So, great question about leadership. Let me start with the U.S. and Prime Minister Abbott, very accurately described in a few sentences the U.S. policies today. But then I think just it happens to all of us at some point. We crash into a very tough, hard surface called reality. So I think there will be corrective actions on the U.S. side, and talking about Europe and the U.S. will move just a few steps in their direction. They will move a few steps in our direction, and there will be some kind of understanding at some point. But let me also point out, this is going to be a one-term administration, or it looks that way, I don't know. But I mean, there will be another president in 4 years, maybe a Republican or a Democrat. So let's not make prophecies about the end of the world. The Europeans, there was an old commercial about some kind of Kentucky whiskey, and there was this bunch of old guys throwing corks to a big wooden basket, and the message was, we have all the time in the world. And I agree that sometimes in Europe we look that way, and it's a big ship that takes time to turn. And yes, often we fail to use our collective power and influence in an efficient manner. But one should not underestimate Europe's talent, capabilities, experience, and the fact that all the commissioners together visited India a couple of months ago shows that there are some reflexes as to where the world is going. Now, on IMEC, I would agree that it has to be the initiative must come and the leadership from the countries of the region, and we need to create a political framework that will make it attractive for the private sector to join in the effort. And and also I think timing is important because it will take time for IMEC to be completed and become functional. So we should think in terms of the goods that will be moving through IMEC, not today, but 10 years down the road. And that will be, I think, a much bigger volume, which may change the calculus of what is economically viable. And last point about Egypt, I fully agree. We had our strategic level meeting with the two leaders and senior ministers about a week ago. We have invested a lot of time and effort to convince other European countries that we need to keep Egypt stable. We need to promote cooperation investment, economic assistance. That has to be a collective effort with our like-minded countries in the Middle East and the Gulf. Egypt is also a pivotal country for keeping the region stable.
I think we also have to remember that regarding Egypt, that Egypt needs to contribute. Everybody's giving money, and China just had a joint Air Force exercise for 18 days with Egypt, right on Israel's border. And Egypt has its own agency, and it continues to be a bottomless pit for money. And I don't think external directives are going to make a difference, but I think we need some creative ways of helping Egypt to take some more responsibility for its own success. At the same time, we all want to work together to make sure that it does succeed. Peter, what's your view of this leadership? Tano says that all the partners need to form a group to lead, but who's going to bring them all together? What do you think about leadership and stability?
Well, first, maybe I should fine-tune a little bit my view on the European Union, because what we are saying is that the European Union could be much better. It could be much more rational, and it should come back to common sense, and it should be able to identify our common interests, because we have common interests. But on many occasions, our experience is that there is no sufficient room for rational debate, for identifying the challenges, the threats, and through that, identifying the tools, and then to make the proper steps. And minority positions are delegitimized on many occasions. And this is also bad for the discussion, because we could make much better decisions if everybody would be on board and if all the different aspects would be taken into account and the national interests of the member states would be really taken seriously. That's one thing. So what we are working on is not something against the EU. We want to have a better EU, basically. The other thing on leadership, I think President Trump has brought back a lot of common sense into international politics. If you take illegal migration, the gender issues, Europe's role in collective defense and Europe's contribution to NATO, I think he's really right. And Hungary was among the countries, very few countries actually, which had expressed their preference for President Trump way before the election. And the reason was that because we saw that he has a leadership role and he has a lot of common sense in his policies. Now we hope that Europe will live up to this and Europe will be able to join forces together with him, because we need leadership, we need US military presence in Europe, because Europe is small in terms of defense, so that's another aspect. I don't want to open it, but it's very important that Europe contributes more to our collective defense and we keep the Americans on board in Europe, because that's the final guarantor of our security for the future. Now, on the Abraham Accords, I didn't speak about it, but there too, we have been one of the staunchest supporters of the Abraham Accords. It was Peter Szijjártó, my foreign minister, who was the only European minister who was present in Washington, D.C. at the original signing of the Accords. And we hope that the Accords can be extended in the future, because that's a very unique, very innovative, possible tool for further stability in the Middle East, which is a primary interest of us because of our security needs. And Egypt, in that respect, is really one of the key countries. And look at the EU, what did we do? The EU was blocking money for Egypt for ground and sea border protection for years. We tried to push others to reach consensus on that. It was not possible. It is a European interest to have strong Egyptian border control, but Europe was not able to do that because of other political and I don't know what kind of considerations. So we have to be more rational, and Egypt is also very important together with Greece, Cyprus, Israel in terms of energy security. There's a whole new horizon for energy supplies for Europe. So we have to work on that and we have to engage the Egyptians.
But what about leadership for IMEC? Who, how, what, where?
When? I don't think leadership for IMEC would come from one specific corner. It has to be a cooperative exercise, and I would not leave out the Americans from that, but maybe also the Europeans and the Indian aspects have to be taken into account, because India might have very specific ideas about this, how they want to proceed, you know. So it's a cooperative aspect. I don't think that one specific corner could direct this whole exercise.
Ibtisam, what do you say on this issue of leadership?
I agree with Peter. It's collective efforts, but my observation, the more serious now in the IMEC, the Indian and the Emirati. They're working hard on that. They signed CEBA between them, and so the others, they are not. The European, until now, they didn't discuss how from where they will bring the funds, how it will work, the railways. They didn't put anything until now. The U.S., the problem that it depends on the mood of the president. If he wants to promote normalization, which is a must. I mean, the Saudi did not normalize, okay? How this can be activated, the project. The other this is now, before Biden was putting the defense agreement vis-a-vis normalization. Now normalization doesn't matter for Trump. So this is something has to be done in the American side. I believe the Saudi also, if they want, they have also to find a way to have connection with the Israeli, regardless what Gaza is going to be, because two-state solution, we all know, it's not viable on the ground. Okay, so if they will wait ages for that, IMEC, it's supposed to be a win-win for everybody. So if you exclude somebody from it, he will become a spoiler. And this is what's happening with Egypt. This is what happened with Iran, by the way. And that's why they spoiled the whole IMEC by asking Hamas to do what it did. So engaging Egypt, it's showing it that also Suez Canal can be alternative. Alexandria can be also going on with that. What is the issue now I am observing with the Trump disengagement with European, with the other world, the soft power of the American shrinks. Now, and this makes the Chinese winning that. Because if the American put more tariffs in Europe, they are closing doors, and the Chinese open the door. So, of course, this is you just moving the players to another ground. And this is the Americans should also revisit their ideas. Somebody talked to Trump that the American will be losers from that.
So, Ibtisam, do you think that India, since Modi and has been to the Emiratis many times on a variety of issues, but seems always brings up IMEC, and you have signed serious agreements, do you think you have the ability, the two of you together, and you're a pretty powerful team, bring in KSA, Israel, Jordan, EU countries, and Egypt for a kind of conclave to explore how the partners might be able to work towards putting this thing on the ground?
Saudi now, they are refusing to sit with Israeli if there is official Israeli. So how can you bring them? My also, another idea, I forgot to, that IMEC is not only on the official level. You have to bring think tanks, you have to bring private sector, because they are also part of that. If you just put it on the official side, it doesn't work. Maybe this is the idea also. Now, that was what I'm saying. Who can put influence and pressure on Saudi? Only the American, in terms of that this is for their benefit, that kind of normalization. Let's say trade normalization with Israel. This is where NUM created. Otherwise, NUM will not work if there is no normalization with Israel. So for their benefit, I mean, looking at it purely business, UAE cannot put pressure on Saudi. India cannot put a pressure on Saudi. But you should discuss it from that angle, from win-win situation angle.
But if it's business, and I don't know your experience or exposure to the Gulf, but considering there is an awful lot going on under the table with Saudi Arabia for years.
Sorry.
And I agree with you. Officially, it's a problem. But what about an unofficial, and also, by the way, getting the Americans to do anything right now is going to be very difficult.
I agree.
So if we take all of these factors into consideration, what about an unofficial framework, what I said, but unofficially, and everybody has 1 minute to respond. Tomohiko, what do you think?
I would love to see someone laying out the future plan after a possible forging of peace accord between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which I hope is going to realize sooner rather than later, and envision a connected future, perhaps by rails, between the Gulf region through Israel and beyond to European nations. One caveat here, however, is that to lay out long-haul rail network is a huge task. One cannot separate superstructure and infrastructure, by which it means superstructure is comprised of signals and control center and so forth, rolling stock included, and infrastructure is about rails. And you need to make all these complex structures as a cohesive unit. And how can you provide those nations with these technologies? But nonetheless, I still maintain that I would like to see an envisioned future map, if you like, connecting these two regions. And also, when it comes to the rail connection, I'm still wondering how you could connect the Gulf region with India by rails. Mm-hmm. I think it's nearly impossible for you to do this.
Kapil, thoughts on Saudi Arabia, and final thoughts, you've got 60 seconds.
60 seconds. I think it cannot be unofficial because you have too many regulatory and security issues that the governments have to work out. I think that the India-Emirati relationship is a framework as to how you can work together. You can overcome some of those issues. I'm a big believer in making I2U2 a success to show to the IMEC countries how to work with Israel above the table, not necessarily under the table. IMEC success will have to be above the table. It's a 20-year plan, so we need to think of it as a 20-year plan.
Excellent. Tanos.
Yeah. Well, 4 sentences. First of all, we need a Gaza ceasefire and a roadmap for a solution in the Palestinian problem for a number of reasons, including IMEC, but also some more important reasons. But in the meantime, and I agree that you can start with the India and UAE, but this is a long-term project. I mean, let's use that time for all types of informal consultations to prepare the ground. Second point, Europe has a tool it can use, which is called Global Gateway, and we need to find ways to link that with IMEC. Third point, let me emphasize the timing question, because the way we see things today is about goods moving from India and Asia-Pacific to Europe. But you mentioned two-way flows. This is going to be the reality 10 or 20 years down the road. So there is the economic incentive for Europeans to invest in that. And final point, again, about China. I mean, it doesn't have to be either BRI or IMEC. We need as many options as possible. So, let's try not to present it as something directed against BRI and China. Let's try to present it as a win-win situation, which I think it is at the end of the day.
Thank you. And Peter, your final thoughts.
Thank you very much. In line with Thanos, I think the last point, yes, it shouldn't go against, as I said in my introductory remarks, it shouldn't go against others. We should build connectivity through connectivity and not through the closing of the channels. On IMEC, I think the only way towards the success of IMEC is through peace in the Middle East. That is the extension of the Abraham Accords, basically. Without that, it's impossible. We need Israel have normal relations with Saudi Arabia, with others, and that will be the key. Apart from India, this is also a strategic aspect of this whole cooperation scheme. So I think, and we all agree on that. Without that, it will be impossible. Through that, I think there's a huge horizon opening up here.
Thank you very much. And Ibtisam, please close us out.
I think we need to create IMEC organization where you have different sectors. You have private sector to private sector think tanks. Here you can create track 2, and you can bring all parties. You don't, regardless the officials, we have this track 2 with different to solve. Then you bring Saudi also through that. You can talk on the private sector in track 2. You can think tank track 2. You can include all those members in that.
I'm with you, and I want to ask all of you to thank our panelists for such an outstanding...
Now we are going to break for 15 minutes. Coffee is going to be served in the back. We are going to continue our program with the second keynote address. It is my honor to introduce His Excellency Saud Hamad Al-Shamsi, Ambassador of the United Arab Emirates to Hungary, who is going to deliver his address titled Anchored in Stability, Driven by Vision, the UAE's Role in Advancing IMEC. Ambassador, the stage is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Dr. Ibtisam, really nice to see you here. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, partners and friends, it is a privilege to address you today at this pivotal moment, a moment when the vision of the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor must begin turning into a shared deliverable reality. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to our gracious hosts, the Danube Institute and the Signap Group, for convening this timely and strategic dialogue. This forum represents exactly the kind of cross-regional leadership and foresight that IMEC is designed to foster. The UAE is proud to be a founding member of IMEC. We joined this initiative not just because of its potential, but because of its alignment with how we already operate as a connector of regions, a hub of logistics and energy, and a stable platform for cooperation. For us, IMEC is not just a concept. It is a continuation of what we do best. Its success will be measured by its ability to replicate and scale the UAE's model: stable governance, integrated infrastructure, and open, rules-based trade. In that spirit, allow me to share the UAE's message. We are ready to contribute, not only in assets, but a tested approach, one that delivers tangible results across borders and over time. At this formative stage, IMEC needs what every complex, cross-border initiative requires most: predictability. Predictability in regulation, in timeliness, in diplomacy, in financing, and above all, in political will. This is precisely where the United Arab Emirates plays a critical and enabling role. In a region often marked by volatility, the UAE stands as a source of stability, not only politically but operationally. We are a country that honors its commitments, that moves quickly without compromising governance, and that consistently coordinates at the highest level. We have demonstrated the ability to function as a platform state, one that facilitates the seamless flow of logistics, capital, energy, and ideas. And today, we are offering that platform to IMEC, not just as it is, but with a clear intent to expand it and scale it to serve the corridor's full ambition. In this spirit of shared responsibility, the UAE is proud to work closely with France and India under the UAE-France-India Trilateral Cooperation Framework. Together, we have proposed the establishment of a joint steering committee, supported by its own dedicated secretariat, to guide and accelerate IMEC's implementation. This mechanism is not only symbolic. It is designed to translate vision to velocity. It will drive feasibility assessments, enhance stakeholder alignment, and ensure that priority projects advance without delay. We are encouraged by the strong and proactive engagement of both the Indian and the French sides, as demonstrated in recent high-level visits and bilateral consultations. These exchanges confirm that IMEC is not just a memorandum. It is a shared strategic priority with growing political traction and real operational momentum. And more importantly, it is a shared strategic priority for the three countries, the founding members of IMEC, along with the European Union, whose engagement will be essential in realizing IMEC's full potential as a bridge between continents. IMEC complements a broader global agenda, including the EU's Global Gateway Strategy and the G7's Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. Together, these efforts represent a shift toward building sustainable, secure, and inclusive connectivity in a multipolar world. The UAE is fully aligned with this direction and already contributes actively to its realization. Through initiatives such as Etihad Rail, the expansion of Jebel Ali Port, and our investments in hydrogen and digital infrastructure, we are laying the essential foundations for IMEC's physical and technological backbone. We are equally committed to supporting clean energy development and advancing green supply chains across the corridor, in line with our national net zero strategy and our long-standing leadership through IRENA and COP28. This is not just a policy, it is a practice. And the UAE stands ready to extend that momentum to all IMEC partners. The UAE's contribution to IMEC is not only infrastructural, it is also institutional and diplomatic. Through a growing network of comprehensive economic partnership agreements, CEPAs, the UAE is shaping the trade environment that IMEC will depend on. Our signed CEPAs with India, Indonesia, Turkey, and others simplify market access, reduce tariffs, and harmonize standards across key segments of the corridor. Most importantly, we are now advancing the discussion on a CEPA with the European Union, an agreement that, once concluded, will create a seamless commercial bridge between IMEC's eastern and western pillars. This would make the UAE one of the few countries in the world with preferential trade frameworks spanning South Asia and the Middle East and Europe, a unique position we intend to use to accelerate IMEC's implementation and impact. These trade and diplomatic instruments, CEPA and trilaterals, are not just tools of engagement. They are levers of delivery, and we are ready to apply them fully in the service of IMEC's success. We do not underestimate the geopolitical headwinds surrounding this project. The many tensions around us are a sober reminder of the fragility that still defines parts of our shared geography. And yet, it is precisely such turbulent moments that bold, stabilizing initiatives like IMEC become not only relevant but urgent. The UAE has long believed that economic cooperation can be a catalyst for regional stability. We will continue to engage all partners diplomatically, economically, and institutionally to help ensure this corridor stays on course. We bring to this effort our track record in mediation, our ability to convene across divides, and a foreign policy grounded in pragmatic diplomacy and trusted neutrality. The UAE stands ready to help sustain the momentum, credibility, and cohesion that IMEC will require to succeed, especially in times of complexity. In closing, allow me to reaffirm the UAE's full and active commitment to IMEC. We see in this initiative a shared mission to build bridges, not barriers, to create opportunity, not division, to deliver meaningful impact stretching from Mumbai to Marseille and from Dubai to Athens and beyond. The UAE brings to this effort not only infrastructure and investment, but stability, conviction, and a proven capacity to deliver. Let us seize this moment together with clarity of purpose, unity of vision, and the determination to turn this corridor from plan to platform and from promise to progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Our second plenary session is titled IMEC and Economic Statecraft, Diversifying Global Supply Chains and Enhancing Energy Security. The moderator is going to be Carlos Roa, visiting fellow at the Danube Institute.
I'll do like Carice and invite the panelists one at a time. Let's start with Ambassador Carlos Sanz, currently Vice Chair at the Center for Energy and Environment at the America First Policy Institute. Next, Ophir Gore, Senior Deputy Chief Economist for National Affairs at the Ministry of Finance of Israel. And last but not least, definitely, Francesco Parisi, President and Managing Director of Francesco Parisi Casa di Pensione. Right, I'll get right down to it. I don't like talking to myself much and like for panelists to share their views first and foremost. So let's start off with the big one, which is how can IMEC help with trans-regional, Pacific, Mediterranean, Middle East, European, and I would say Middle East Pacific integration. This is admittedly a very broad question, so I'll probably try to narrow it down. Let's start with how can the initiative improve supply chain resiliency via providing alternatives to existing routes, choke points, and so forth. Let's start with Ophir.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. So, like you said, indeed, IMEC tackles two major global challenges. The first one is weak and vulnerable supply chains, and the second one is the growing energy insecurity. For supply chains, IMEC offers a new, reliable trade route connecting India, the Gulf. Actually, I like the term GIMEC. Also, definitely Japan should be part of it. By the way, also perhaps other partners. I know that we talked a lot about a certain kind of competition, perhaps with when I was serving in China, then it used to be called One Belt, One Road. Right now, as I heard, it's called BRI, right? Belt and Road. But why perhaps can't it be few belts, few roads? Eventually, we're talking about an alternative, right? It's not a competition. We're not competing with anyone. This is actually something that can complete the solution. So from my point of view, this should be something that is perhaps a little bit more, I would say, I would use again the word, even though Caris doesn't like it, the word inclusive, and I would say that definitely could be some kind of an inclusive solution. So as also, I will get back to it, you mentioned also choke points like the Suez Canal, right now like we had, at least until recently with the Houthis, at least we in Israel, we still have, of course, a problem with it. But beside that, also we have in the region the Straits of Hormuz, in case something will happen in the Gulf. Definitely, this is also something that we should think about. So IMEC, as Caris mentioned, it's not only about goods. We're talking about also digital and data infrastructures. We're talking about energy. Also, Ibtissam also mentioned the issue of hydrogen, and definitely we have a lot of solar energy in our region. This is something that eventually we can route directly to Europe. But also another thing is the issue of geopolitical tensions. Another thing that I heard about that we have to wait for peace. Of course, peace is something that definitely would like to get. This is something that we all strive to get. But contrary to what was said in the last panel, I think that we cannot wait to peace. I think that this is something that we should work upon right now. And actually, if you will wait until the perfect moment and everything is going to be stable and nice and harmony, so then we'll wait for eternity, unfortunately, and in vain. I think that the perfect moment to work upon IMEC is right now. And I think this is also an incentive to all the sides that are somehow connected to IMEC, is to realize what they can gain out of it, what they can gain from normalization. And I think this is also an incentive also for us to work upon IMEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With Francesco, sorry, Carla, because you are in shipping and trading, so you have to deal with consequences of this directly. So what do you see as the benefits of IMEC in supply chains, and how can it help in doing that?
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. First of all, I have a vested interest in cargo shipping, as you mentioned, and I live on the shores of the Mediterranean, so my first focus is to make sure that the Mediterranean remains alive and remains vital and vibrant, and I share the same view with friends from Greece or from France and from the whole region of the Mediterranean, Israel as well, of course. But my interest is also for a very proactive role of Italy in the IMEC, and a very proactive role of Italy in promoting one gateway, which has not been mentioned so far, of IMEC in the southern shore or in the northern shore of the Mediterranean, which is Trieste, which is the most northern port in the Adriatic. And of course, we know about Marseille, we know about Piraeus promoting themselves for a similar role. It will not be one single port, this is for sure. But on the other hand, you will never have goods coming from Hungary or going to Hungary to Budapest via Marseille, while you will not have goods going to Madrid or coming from Madrid going to Trieste. This is sure. But anyway, it is important, in our opinion, to have some ports that are promoted as gateways of IMEC. Now, the interest of the private business, and we have established back in October, so 1 year after signature of the IMEC MOU, October 2024, we have established an association of private business, family business, which I have been asked to chair. Our vision is the following. Of course, what happened for the Suez Canal, the problems in the choke points, Bab el-Mandeb and Suez, are very relevant. I mean, even before we had the famous Evergreen vessel, which was stranded in the Suez Canal, which show how fragile it is. In our opinion, it is the right time now to think about land bridges connecting the Arab Gulf to the southern shore of the Mediterranean to make the Suez Canal less fragile. In this respect, I believe that the pure existence of land bridges between the United Arab Emirates or Basra and the southern shore of the Mediterranean will strengthen the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal will remain for sure the most relevant connection between Indo-Pacific, not Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific and the Mediterranean. The other reason why it is important is that by such a route, it will be faster transit time. My estimate is that you will save 15 days transit between India and Western Europe, and this will open up market in the bilateral trade, very important markets. And the third point, and the third reason why we support very much this, is that we consider in the medium, long term, the Arctic route as a possible alternative for shipping between the northern and Far East, northern part of Far East, which means north of China, but also Japan and also Korea. It may become more convenient to come to Europe or receive goods from Europe by navigating the Arctic route. And therefore, in the Mediterranean, we have to push the western part of the Indo-Pacific, which is the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean means also Southeast Asia, because you have the Bengal Gulf, which is also very important in the whole Southeast Asia. So this is the reason why we support very much IMEC, and we support also our hometown, our port, Trieste, where, by the way, Hungarian government has received a concession, landlocked country. After many years, they have received a concession for establishing a terminal in the port of Trieste. So this is shortly the reasons I give
Hungary has, therefore, their vested interest in this, and thank you. That's a pretty comprehensive answer, and you just gave me the perfect segue to turn to Carla, since she used to be the ambassador of the United States to Denmark, which includes Greenland, which is of some controversy. I assume some of you have noticed. So, Carla, do you want to follow up on this?
Sure. Thank you, Carlos. Northern Sea Route is interesting and does cut off about 20 days, up to 20 days in transit for certain countries. But I think it's a great week to talk about IMEC because President Trump's going to UAE and Saudi Arabia this week. And so that's exciting. And we know he signed that MOU back in February of this year. And he stated, I'm paraphrasing, he's going to build the most beautiful road that's ever been built for trade between Italy, Israel, and India. And the signatories on that MOU, it's India, it's the United States, it's the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the EU, Italy, France, and Germany. And so when we think about the beneficiaries and the sort of knock-on effect of all the other players around there, it is building prosperity through this trade route. And that is a key diplomatic point, is that this, like someone mentioned, the veins and arteries. This is going to be so many veins and arteries, and the benefits are going to be exponential. But I think that we have to also look at what is the pace of us embracing the idea. This is not the first time this idea has been floated. And so it's complicated. This is a big, difficult deal with so many stakeholders. And do you, as a leader, or your country and the administration, have a plan to implement this where they're going to have a timeline and literally follow through implementing? Because we can all talk about it, but it's going to be very, very difficult to get this done, especially with so many different interests. So I think that is, I mean, the time is now. This is a great time to be talking about IMEC. In fact, a friend of mine, Kaush, likes to call it the new golden road. And if we think about the new golden road, I like to think that this could be President Trump's legacy, because this is the baby of the Abraham Accords. It wouldn't be possible without the Abraham Accords, which was from the first Trump administration. And IMEC is unfinished business from the first Trump administration. And so we could say that the new golden road is the baby of the Abraham Accords. And I like how that works.
Thank you, Carice. Also, and thank you, Carla. A bit of context, Kosh, who's in the audience over there, and I co-wrote the article terming the new golden road, taking from a historical book, arguing how the golden road was connecting from ancient Rome to India. Little fun fact, the most number of Roman coins you'll find outside the empire are in India, around 55 million sestertia a year, and taxes on all this pay for around a third of the Roman Empire's expenses. So the Indo-Med connection existed even back then. Now, this, what Carlos said is, there are a lot of obstacles from situation in Israel, the Indo-Pac tensions, and more, simple obstacles such as who will pay for this? Always the fun question. So how do we overcome some of these obstacles? I know this is a very broad question as well, but let's start with the security ones. How do we overcome these security issues? Ophir, do you want to tackle this one?
Again, as I said, if we're going to wait until everything is going to be secure and nice and stable, so we will wait forever. So I do understand that eventually we will need stability, but we cannot wait until we'll get to this stability. Eventually, IMEC is the one that with the IMEC we will reach eventually the stability. We should definitely, I believe, build eventually some big infrastructure projects. Again, I'm talking about perhaps data centers and optic cyber cables, and I believe that eventually, once it will be understood that this route, this corridor, is something that is going to happen, I think that all the relevant stakeholders are going to eventually understand that that's a realistic option on the table, and everyone is going to take care to their point of view. It was mentioned earlier that IMEC do not have a leader, right? But definitely the US have a very important role in it, perhaps not the leader, but perhaps the facilitator, perhaps the coordinator. But no doubt that eventually, since all the players are going to get something out of it, no doubt that the US shouldn't be the only one that is taking care of the security, etc. As we do understand, eventually President Trump do want to make it happen. But all of the players in this initiative, we do have to chip in. We do understand eventually, by the way, we cannot wait to stability, because one of the reasons that we need IMEC is because of the lack of stability in the region, right? We see what is going on in the Red Sea, and this is exactly why we need an alternative. So I believe once the players will understand that this is the alternative, we will all take care of our own security issues.
Carl, I want to follow up on that, since you mentioned the United States may not be a leader, but certainly has a role in coordinating this.
Yes, and before I answer that, I just want to thank the Danube Institute and Signal Group for hosting this and inviting me to participate. But so Saudi Arabia and the U.S. neither have put a timetable in place. And I think a timetable that everyone agrees to and sticks to could help push forward the project. Otherwise, there will be so many distractions that it will never get completed. But I like to think that that this is part of President Trump's foreign policy. I don't speak for him, but he looks at things as, what are we selling? What are we building together? What are we protecting together? So it's diplomacy through prosperity. And in the U.S., we're looking at how do we reshore our economy. And we're together now in this building infrastructure and industrial mechanisms to reach our goals of uplifting all sovereign nations that are involved. That's how we look at it. But it's also exciting that we're getting these trade deals done, because this is going to help as well. So the U.S., as you may know, just completed the U.K. trade deal, and we're working on one with India. EU is also working on one with India, and it seems like China is coming along, although that may be difficult to hold that,
The news keeps on going back and forth. One day they're doing negotiations, the next not really, the next we have a deal, the next...
Yeah, so we'll see, but it's good news anyway, that if you're talking, it's good news, in my opinion. And then, so we look at, I think the timetable is going to be really, really critical for all the different stakeholders to come to a loose agreement and then move forward. And the energy piece is really important, the oil, the gas, and then the small nuclear reactors. Those are important as well, and we can see Romania and Poland are already using those. So that'll be a piece of it. When I hear things like net zero, it worries me, I have to say, because in many people's opinions in the U.S., we feel like it's anti-human, and it is deindustrializing Europe and, say, the Western world, this whole net zero idea.
And we kind of saw Spain shut down there, because kind of a scary warning for some people.
That was really scary, Portugal and Spain.
Yep, and it's parts of southern France.
Yeah.
Speaking of Europe, let's go to Francesco. What do you see as the obstacles for the European side to making this all happen, since you have, as you mentioned, yes, multiple ports, but also multiple competing interests, plus the EU bureaucracy who will fund this? Someone say, well, we should do it. No, not really. We want to fund this port, not this port. So how do we make this happen from the European side?
I would like to tell you the following. I mean, from a European perspective, let's not underestimate the economic strength of Europe in the shipping world. The first 4 container shipping lines of the world are European shipping lines. And the shipping lines, the container shipping lines, are more and more integrated transport operators, connecting port operations, connecting land bridges, especially by rail. We know that CMA-CGM, which is the 3rd largest European French container shipping lines, has been visited by President Modi together with Macron, and is promoting the idea. And I can tell you that also MSC has a clear interest in this plan. So it is these kind of giants have the strength to finance also long-term projects like this. Of course, I fully agree that rail infrastructure must be a private-public partnership, because rail infrastructure cannot be paid just by the private sector. So this is my point of view. Then, of course, there is a healthy competition in Europe among different European countries, and this can also bring benefits and not only negative aspects. We will do our best to promote the role of Italy and the Port of Trieste for IMEC. And you know, concerning practical steps, first of all, well, I think there are 8 signatories of IMEC. It's not a huge number of countries. You mentioned that as well. If each of them nominates a special envoy for IMEC, it's 8 people meeting, not a big deal, you know. And also, I mean, the Italian foreign affairs minister visiting 4 weeks ago, New Delhi, has announced that he would like to have a summit of the foreign ministers of the IMEC signatories to be held in my region, in my hometown, in the second half of the year. So steps are taken that will lead. It is anyway something that I have always said, I have initiated. It will be for the benefit of my grandchildren, or Carlos, when he's here, will be wide like mine.
It's a lovely thought to have right
it's
now.
It's not something for the next year. It's something that has to be initiated now, but is a long-term project.
Well, this brings us to a good question. Next steps. So one next step is putting more, ambassadors, holding summits, but what other practical steps can be done? Either of you have any suggestions?
Sure. I'm hearing that President Trump may appoint a special envoy to shepherd this, but they're going to, like I said, they're going to have a time constraints and then deliverables to make sure that things move forward. But I think that there's also a policy process, and the partners in the United States are wanting to move forward, and the planning is being put in place for the launch, and we're talking about, this is how excited people are saying, the IMEC fire is alive, okay? And there's lots of promise, lots of potential for prosperity for all of these sovereign nations. But President Trump and his administration speaking about it is a clear signal this is a priority for the Trump administration. So because it's so complicated, we have to say who's going to lead that group. And I think there will need to be some leader or a tight coalition of leaders. You get 8 big leaders, I think it's tough. If you have several, 1, 2, 3, then maybe it's more possible to move it forward.
Right. Ophir, any view on next steps?
Well, I guess I would say obvious things. I think indeed, like already said, eventually the basic step should be having a round table of all the stakeholders to start speaking about it, as we said, right now. I'm not speaking only about governments. I'm also speaking about infrastructure agencies, of course, private companies, international organizations. I think we should all get together and start the discussions. And again, we can do it right now. We don't need to wait for a normalization. This is something that we can start talking about. We can have a high-level roundtable that should focus upon practical implementation. For example, when it comes to logistics and transport and costume coordination, indeed, between the government and data infrastructure and energy connectivity. This is also something that, of course, is connected both to the private sector, but also, of course, to the government. Again, we can. This is important in order to start building trust between the sides. Eventually, the economic benefits can motivate also political progress, as I said earlier. And this is, a bridge to practical collaboration. We should definitely together align on standards and set joint practices. In parallel, we can also do joint investments, pilot projects, also feasibility studies. Again, for all of these, we don't really need to wait. For all of the, we don't actually need. Again, as I said, eventually we do hope we'll get peace, and hopefully during the visit of President Trump in the region, hopefully we'll get some good news, but no need to wait. Anyway, as mentioned, this is a project for generations. So let's start working on it right now. Thanks.
Right. On the issue of energy connectivity, and I'd be remiss not to make use of the ample talent here, how can we ensure this is carried out, energy efficiency and diversifying energy supply chains as well, since I take the view that everything in the world depends upon the use of energy, basic economics. And Carla, let's go with you. Like, how can IMEC help ensure energy security and so forth?
Sure. So what President Trump likes to say, an all-of-the-above energy approach, I prefer to say best of the above. Because not all forms of energy are created equal. And, coal hasn't even been mentioned, but we talk about oil and gas, we talk about nuclear. I think that the most dense, most capable energy supplies that give us baseload power are critical, especially for the global south, that largely has not been able to enjoy the Industrial Revolution. They need that cheap and abundant energy, and we have many in the West restricted their ability to grow and prosper.
Francesco, Trieste, if I recall, is also a bit of an energy hub, and so you're very attuned to this. I imagine you have a few views on this?
Don't ask me about energy, ask me about dry goods. But anyway, Trieste as a pipeline connecting the Adriatic for oil, for the whole of southern Germany, for the Czech Republic, and for Austria. So it's a very important supplier of, of energy material. This, of course, is a proof that Trieste lies in a logistically optimal position to serve Central and Eastern Europe. This is a proof. You know, now, what will be, of course, energy, like the supply of most other goods, but energy especially, now the very important issue is to have a diversified supply sources, and Europe has suffered enough by being too much dependent on just one source, especially on gas. So, I mean, IMEC as also a connectivity corridor for energy as well as data, whatever you want, is something that is very much in the interest of Europe.
Very much so, especially since we saw with the Ukraine war, sanctions on Russia led to a cold winter or two here in the continent and still higher energy prices. So the Europeans are definitely looking for alternatives that are affordable and so forth. Ophir, any views on this, on energy connectivity?
Well, no doubt that when it comes to energy, the Middle East is definitely a hub, right? We're talking also about fossil fuels, and we all know about the gas fields and oil of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, etc. So definitely we can eventually get, since Israel is a land bridge between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, definitely, and again, we're not competing with the Suez Canal, but definitely we can supply an alternative for that. So we can be a players also when it comes to fossil fuels. But let's talk also about green hydrogen, and let's talk about solar energy. You know, with the Middle East, most of the countries, we do have sun 365 days a year. So definitely this is something that we can also supply Europe. We know that their weather is not as sunny as our weather. So no doubt that also when it comes to energy, the Middle East can be a hub, and we can, in this aspect, we can be a corridor that will supply both to Europe and also to India and Japan, etc.
So again, Japan, this is a good way to segue. How can external actors get involved or help, including the United States? But I just want to hear, both takes. Like, who can come in? How can they help? For what? Carla, any views on this? How can the United States come in and help both government but also in business?
Well, yeah, I think if you're talking about Japan and South Korea, that whole region, it's under a lot of stress, and they certainly need energy. I mean, we're selling them energy, but how great would it be to pull them in a secondary way into the new Golden Road and the energy that's coming from that region? So I think it's brilliant. Because everyone needs a diversified energy supply, especially of oil and gas. Yeah.
Of course, IMEC is India to Europe through the Middle East, but the transportation network, the intercontinental transportation network are highly connected. So the advantages that can be reached on the route between India and Europe will be spread over to Japan, to Korea, to the rest of the world. I mean, this is something which is benefiting a much broader area. I was mentioning before Southeast Asia, which for me is very interesting because it lies at the edge of the possible diversion via Arctic route. So if we win Southeast Asia together with the Indian subcontinent and Arabian Peninsula, that is a big market, especially considering the growth of India and Southeast Asia as well, and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So it spreads by itself. I don't think it needs to be formally linked to IMEC, if this is the question.
Sort of, but at the same time, you're just kind of adding innocent.
Also, I mean, I'm very happy if we extend it to Japan, but I am afraid it will lose its real meaning, which is connectivity in an area which is relatively near, not covering the whole globe. But I mean, the effects will spread to the whole globe system of transportation.
Sort of funny, since in the original Golden Road, the book which we kind of came terminology from, the effects also from India spread down to Southeast Asia through transmission of gold, cultural influence, and so forth. So you are right. It happens mostly within a limited transregional context, but it spreads outward. Ophir, any views on external, non-part of the transregional actors getting involved? Government, private, how can they help?
I want to, if it's okay, I want to speak about the importance of IMEC specifically actually to Israel. And I have some quotes that I read in an article, perhaps you will know about it.
Oh, no.
Israel must seek innovative paths to national cohesion, regional integration, and international alliance building in an era marked by rapid and unpredictable change. Another quote I found especially powerful: turning Israel into a magnet for regional economic interests, especially the Gulf, would allow an economic peace to take shape. And finally, the G20's proposal for IMEC depends greatly upon Israel's participation. IMEC could be seen as Netanyahu's administration crowning economic achievement. And I guess you know who wrote this article.
Yeah, I did a while ago.
Yes, you did. So I couldn't agree more. I think eventually IMEC is specifically important to Israel, and I think it's extremely important to the rest of the world. As we said, geographically wise, Israel is a prominent player in this because, again, we're a land bridge. But we would give, again, our kind of innovation kind of thoughts and our vision about stability in the region. And as I said, again, I know it's not stable, and we have wars, and right now we have also the trade wars, and we saw what happened, and hopefully we are going to sustain the ceasefire between India and Pakistan. But again, we cannot wait. We need right now to act. And the IMEC is not a substitute for peace. Okay, this is, again, we're not talking about it, but the IMEC is an important tool in order to have and to reach peace.
Mm-hmm. There are, as you pointed out, there will be various routes. There are those who say, that we should have the land route from the Gulf states to Jordan to Israel. But I believe the Turkish government has said, now hang on a second, why not just cross from Iraq into, reaching Turkey? So there will be, and the Egyptians, and I think Francesco knows this quite well, will say, now hang on a second, we're not all that happy about losing some of the passage through the Suez Canal. Not that we know we're not overloaded, but so how do we maintain everyone ensuring mutual gain? And takers?
As a businessman, I am in favor of the most possible opportunities and alternatives. And this is, however, what also the supply chain managers look nowadays. One only alternative is not enough. You must have plan B, plan C, plan D already in place. Now, how you can finance 2 or 3 land bridges, this is another matter, of course, not so easy. I think Egypt will only gain from that because it will create a growth in trade that will bring to even greater volume of before the Houthi for the Suez Canal. And there will be enough for the land bridge or land bridges between the Arabian Gulf and the southern shore of the Mediterranean. It would be interesting because, as far as I know, there is another MOU which was signed in April 2024 by Turkey, Iraq, Oman, if I'm not mistaken, and the United Arab Emirates. So the United Arab Emirates are signatories of two Memorandum of Understanding, and this second one is for a land bridge between Al-Faw, which is near Basra, to Iskenderun. So I think this is something interesting. From our point of view, we would support alternative land bridges.
Yeah, in the one we're talking about, though, Mumbai benefits, Dubai benefits, Jeddah. I think that if we just focus on the IMEC, the new Golden Road today, I think it's a good idea. There's so many moving parts. It's going to be hard to hold it together and not go off on too many trails or tangents. But I also want to share that, President Trump and his administration talk about America first, but it's America first, but not America alone, ever. We need our allies and partners, and we value them, and that's a very important part of this. Otherwise, I'm not sure that we would even be engaged in this exercise. It's beneficial to the world, but there's, I would say, little direct benefit to the United States. But we want to be part of this because these are our friends and allies.
Again, I would say I'm not afraid of a competition. As you said, as a client and as a customer, eventually you would like to have few options. And this is why one belt, one road, or let's say correctly, few belts, few roads. Let's have the IMEC. Perhaps a country like the UAE can be also a player in few options, and also other countries. And eventually we'll decide upon the option that will be the most efficient one, like every customer. And could be that in March you will decide to go with this route, and in June you will decide to take another route. And that's great. And that will make us that eventually will make all of us to be excellent in what we are doing and to give good solutions for the customers.
And the new Golden Road avoids Iran. And we haven't talked about that. That is very important, and Iran proxies.
Well, and now, Iran's a bit more contained these days after Israel's Hezbollah is no longer an issue, so it's a bit more contained now. And now Syria is also, there's talk of opening a route there. So we'll see how it goes. We're starting to run out of time, and I believe in audience questions. So is there anyone in the audience with an interesting question or two?
Hello. Thank you all for this fascinating discussion. My name is Sean Nodley. I am a visiting fellow here at the Danube Institute, and I'm a fellow Trumpian. I was a regional director on the Trump campaign in Georgia, so it's nice to see another Trump guy here. So my question here is about, well, I guess it's directed to you. With the creation of IMEC, we're trying to really avoid all these critical choke points. Something that I've been raising issue about for the past 5 years, something you'll agree with about Greenland, is the importance of the Arctic and the North Sea route that's been opening up, and all the security concerns, the opportunities for trade, and everything there. And we can see shipments from Asia to Europe in 10 to 15 days as well. And our adversaries are clearly investing a lot there. With, from the American perspective, with our allies not as invested in key points in the Arctic as we are, is IMEC sort of a more immediate solution for avoiding these choke points? Or do you feel that America and the Trump administration is going to focus equally on both the Northern Sea Route and IMEC?
I think they're going to focus more on the new Golden Road. This is why. Russia has 40 icebreakers. Many of them have missiles on them. The U.S. has 2. One works. And Russia, even though we want open seas around the world, and that is something that the United States has worked hard to maintain, we need our friends to do more. Russia controls the Northern Sea route, and Russia and China are working hand in hand to move goods. So it is a more difficult problem. When you look at the Russian real estate in the Arctic, it's ginormous. And they've militarized those old Cold War bases. They've reopened them. They've built new ones. So it's a very difficult situation. And I think the Trump administration acknowledges, and I would say it's a bipartisan acknowledgement, that we have to do more in the Arctic region. That we were asleep at the wheel since the end of the Cold War. So I think that this is an easier, achievable goal to increase trade, connectivity, diplomacy through prosperity, that these different stakeholders have more jobs, more money, more goods, more energy. It's so good and so positive that we just have to keep the wind at our back, have a TikTok on it so that we're working. I don't mean TikTok, which India banned in 2019. I mean the timing of this thing to keep that rhythm in our minds.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm of an age, my name's Robert. I'm of an age where there was actually a magic bus that started in London and went all the way to Kathmandu, Nepal. So my question is, even though there are folks from Israel, obviously that magic bus did not go through Israel at that time. But the obvious thing to me, if you really want to connect all these places, is to recreate those land bridges across, which then, of course, takes away the power of the Houthis, etc. It would seem to me that if President Trump, and you are somewhat close to him, I think in some ways or another, is there any opportunity there to create a land bridge of peace across, rail or otherwise, obviously rail's the best, to go to India in order to make actually all of this happen and recreate what was once an alternative to the Silk Road?
Transportation.
I am well aware that India is investing a lot in the rail transportation and is thinking really in a land bridge crossing from Mundra to Calcutta to go from the Arabic Gulf to the Gulf of Bengal. So it's something which is certainly thinkable, like you have also land bridge between California and the East Coast.
So he supports this land, sea, route, and one of the speakers on the prior panel talked about how all of the rail gauge has to be the same so that the cars can move. Well, it seems logical, but when you have so many stakeholders, not so easy. So just making everything uniform, like someone said, harmonizing, and just making sure that it's all working correctly. In fact, you even said blockchain, and then but we're not going to talk about that. Like making things efficient, effective, and that it is all working together, but quickly. So how do you do that? Not to lose the momentum. This is the time, and I think it has to be pushed quickly. I would say moving fast will make sure that it happens. Otherwise, we're going to do it European style. We're going to talk about it for the next 10 years, and then maybe it happens, after my lifetime.
Any others?
Francesco, I wonder if you could maybe just elaborate a little bit more for folks understanding the Hungarian terminal and the significance of that and how that fits into the role of Trieste. And also maybe explain a bit more about the intermodal connectivity potential from Trieste to other parts of Europe, either across to the Black Sea or heading north.
Well, we still enjoy here in Trieste and in Budapest and in Vienna and in Prague the rail infrastructure which was built 200 years ago by the empire. Now, The rail connectivity has improved a lot since the year 2000, thanks a directive of the European Union that opened up the rail infrastructure to all private enterprises for cargo. Before that, it was a monopoly of the state incumbent company, you know. And rail was used as a strategic matter. It was actually closed towards the border, you know. It was meant to avoid that someone comes in your territory by rail, you know. And this has brought to a lot of technical problems, which have been gradually overcome thanks standardization and so I always explain the simple story of rail connection between my hometown Trieste and Munich in Germany, which is 500 kilometers, and Munich and Hamburg, which is 700 kilometers. We were not able to compete because our rail transportation was three stretches, one on the Italian railway, one on the Austrian railway, and the other on the German one, each one 150 kilometers, and each one changing at the border. So we were not able to compete. We became able to compete when it could be done like one. Now, from Trieste, we enjoy this infrastructure, and therefore, especially in the intra-Mediterranean trade, and especially in the trade with Turkey to Western Europe, we have developed a very, very strong network of intermodal trains that allow within 48 hours goods to reach from Trieste, Berlin, or Stockholm, or London. So this is, you have to see the Adriatic is like a canal which enters the center east of Europe, and therefore allows, if you have shuttle vessels going up and down, it allows then very fast connectivity. You go from Ankara to Berlin in 5 days, you know, and therefore the idea is that you may go from Mumbai to again Berlin, say, in 15 days, maybe via land bridge, Emirates, Haifa. So this is the idea behind. And it makes, you know, you have different goods. The goods that require fast transportation are very different than the goods that require normal transit time. Those can go via the Suez Canal. You create a totally new market for goods and for trade between countries when you have a fast route, which is not air transport, which would be extremely expensive. I don't know if this is answering your question. Thank you.
I think on that positive note, the new markets that can be opened with new means of transportation and how IMEC enables this is a good point for us to stop, especially since I'm catching us up a bit on time since we started a tad bit late, and now we're all hungry, we want to go to lunch. So I want to thank all our panelists, and I thank the audience for questions.